you ever wondered why some startups skyrocket to success while others, with more money, better ideas, and bigger teams, collapse almost overnight? Why is it that one entrepreneur with nothing but a laptop and a stubborn dream ends up changing the world, while another with millions in funding burns out before the first year ends? The truth is shocking. Success in business is not about having the perfect idea. It's about learning faster than your competitors. And the lean startup reveals the hidden system behind that speed. The entrepreneurs who survive aren't the smartest. They aren't the richest. They are the ones who master the art of experimenting, failing intelligently, and pivoting before reality destroys them. In a world where 90% of startups fail, Eric Ries exposes something uncomfortable. Most failures are preventable. Most businesses don't die because the idea was bad. They die because the founders never learned what their customers actually wanted. And this book is a brutal reminder that passion alone is never enough. You need a method, a process, a way to turn uncertainty into progress. Think about your own dreams for a moment. How many times have you thought, I just need the right idea, or I need more money before I can start? Eric Ries cuts through all that noise and says something radical. You don't need perfection, you need movement. You don't need a flawless business plan, you need feedback. You don't need to predict the future, you need to test it, one tiny step at a time. This method has built billion-dollar companies, saved startups from collapse, and transformed ordinary people into innovators who actually succeed. But here's the twist: the lean startup isn't just a business book. It's a mindset, a philosophy of creating, testing, and reinventing not just your products, but yourself. It's for anyone who has ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or terrified of failing, because this book teaches you a truth that can change your life. Failure is not the opposite of success, it's the fuel that powers it. So today, as we dive into this book, get ready to question everything you thought you knew about creating something meaningful. Get ready to rethink how you work, how you build, and how you turn ideas into reality. Because once you understand the principles inside the lean startup, you will never look at innovation, failure, or success the same way again. And by the end of this video, you might just uncover the missing piece you need to finally start your own journey. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Start. Every great movement, every revolutionary company, every world-changing idea begins with something deceptively small, a single step into the unknown. And that is exactly where the lean startup begins, at the moment when an entrepreneur decides to step away from the comfort of planning and dreaming and finally enters the reality of building. Chapter 1: Start doesn't talk about million-dollar launches or polished strategies. Instead, it exposes the raw truth. The beginning of every startup is chaos, but inside that chaos lies possibility if you know how to navigate it. Eric Ries wants you to face a difficult but liberating fact. The future is unpredictable. No matter how much you plan, how many spreadsheets you prepare, or how many experts you consult, the marketplace will always surprise you. Most people fear this uncertainty, but the lean startup method tells you to embrace it. Instead of wasting months perfecting a product nobody wants, you start by asking a different question. How can I learn what works as quickly as possible? That single shift, from prediction to learning, creates the foundation for modern entrepreneurship. What makes this chapter powerful is that it destroys the myth of the genius founder. We grow up believing that successful entrepreneurs are visionaries who can see the future with perfect clarity. But Rise reveals the reality. Successful founders are learners, not prophets. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They don't wait until the idea is flawless. They start with something small, something imperfect, something real, and they let the world teach them what comes next. This is the mindset shift that separates the winners from the dreamers. Rise introduces the concept of the startup as an experiment, not a finished product. Instead of asking, will this make money someday? The lean startup asks, can we build something that customers truly want? It's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. Suddenly, progress isn't measured by how busy you are, how many features you've built, or how polished your design looks. Progress is measured by validated learning, insights gained from real customers, real feedback, real behavior. In this chapter, Rise also shares a hard truth. Many people think they're building a startup when they are really building a fantasy. They perfect, polish, and plan endlessly, comforting themselves with the illusion of productivity. But in reality, they're terrified of facing the market. They fear rejection, They fear failure. They fear that their big dream might not survive contact with real people, and so they hide behind preparation. The Lean Startup calls this out boldly. It says, stop hiding, start building. Even if your product is ugly, unfinished, or broken, it can teach you more than any business plan ever will. The sooner you test, the sooner you learn. And the sooner you learn, the sooner you can build something truly valuable. Chapter 1 isn't just about starting a business, it's about starting with courage. It's about questioning your assumptions, accepting that you don't know everything, and trusting that progress comes from action, not perfection. And once you embrace this mindset, the journey ahead, filled with experiments, failures, pivots, and breakthroughs, becomes not a frightening road, but an exciting exploration of possibilities. This chapter sets the tone. Don't wait, don't guess, start. Chapter 2, Define. Before a startup can grow, before it can experiment or pivot or scale, it must do something far more fundamental. It must define what it is really trying to achieve. Chapter 2 of the Lean Startup challenges one of the biggest illusions in entrepreneurship, the belief that success comes from having the right idea. Eric Ries argues that ideas alone are worthless unless they are grounded in a clear understanding of purpose, and that purpose must be defined with ruthless clarity. This chapter forces entrepreneurs to confront a question that sounds simple but is incredibly difficult. What does progress actually mean for your startup? Most founders answer this with vanity metrics: more users, more downloads, more likes, more buzz. But Rise cuts through this noise. He warns that these superficial indicators feed the ego, not the business. You may feel successful, but feelings don't build sustainable companies. What matters is not how many people notice your startup, but how many people find real value in it. And defining value requires a level of honesty most founders are afraid to face. Rise introduces the concept of the startup's vision, but he doesn't describe vision as a poetic dream or an inspirational statement. Instead, he defines it as a commitment to solving a real problem for real people. Vision is not just what you want to build, it's the deeper reason behind why you're building it. The Lean Startup insists that founders must define their vision before they write a single line of code or open the doors of their business. Without vision, everything becomes reactive. With vision, every experiment, every product change, every strategic move becomes purposeful. But defining a vision is not enough. A startup must also define its strategy, the path it believes will bring that vision to life. This is where many entrepreneurs go wrong. They confuse their strategy with their vision, their features with their purpose, their assumptions with facts. Rise warns that strategies are temporary, they are hypotheses that must be tested and, when necessary, changed, but the vision remains constant. This distinction liberates founders from the fear of failure. If a strategy fails, it doesn't mean the vision is dead. It simply means the startup must adjust its approach. Then comes the most practical part of this chapter, the need to define actual metrics, the kind that truly reflect customer behavior and business growth. Rise labels these as actionable metrics, opposed to the vanity metrics that only make entrepreneurs feel good. Actionable metrics answer real questions. Do customers come back? Do they pay? Do they tell others? Do they value the product enough to change their behavior because of it? These metrics don't flatter, they reveal the truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, is the only foundation on which a real business can be built. What makes this chapter so powerful is that it forces you to step out of your fantasies and face reality. To define your vision means confronting what problem you're solving. To define your strategy means admitting your assumptions. And to define your metrics means measuring the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. This level of clarity is rare, but when a startup achieves it, chaos transforms into direction, uncertainty becomes manageable, and progress becomes measurable. Chapter 2 reminds us that building a startup isn't just about creating something new, it's about understanding why it matters. When you define your purpose, your strategy, and your metrics with clarity, every step you take becomes meaningful. You stop wandering and start building with intention. And that is the first real step toward innovation that lasts. Chapter 3, Learn. Every startup begins with hope, ambition, and a belief that its idea can change the world. But Chapter 3 of the Lean Startup delivers a sobering truth. Most of what entrepreneurs believe in the beginning is wrong. Not slightly wrong, deeply wrong. And the only way to transform an idea into a real, thriving business is through learning. But not just any kind of learning, validated learning, a disciplined process of discovering what customers truly want. This chapter attacks a dangerous myth that destroys countless startups, the assumption that passion and hard work are enough to guarantee success. Entrepreneurs often spend months, even years, building features nobody uses, polishing designs nobody cares about, and perfecting business plans that collapse the moment they meet reality. It's painful, but it's common. Why? Because most people would rather be busy than be honest. They would rather work harder than confront the possibility that their assumptions are flawed. Eric Ries calls this the startup delusion, and Chapter 3 is the cure. Ries defines validated learning as the process of proving, through real data, that your product is moving closer to what customers actually need. It's not learning based on intuition, wishful thinking, or optimistic projections. It's learning grounded in evidence. This kind of learning feels uncomfortable because it exposes flaws. It forces entrepreneurs to ask questions they're afraid to answer. Do people really want this? Will they actually pay for it? Is this solving a real problem? But facing these questions early is what separates a startup that grows from one that disappears quietly. Eric Ries makes a bold argument. A startup's job is not to build stuff, it is to learn. Learning is the product. Learning is the progress. Every feature, every experiment, every test should exist for one purpose: to reduce uncertainty. And the faster a startup learns, the faster it can adapt, pivot, and ultimately succeed. One of the most powerful ideas in this chapter is the concept of the build, measure, learn feedback loop. Traditional businesses build first, release later, and hope for the best. But startups operate in uncertainty. They can't rely on assumptions, they must cycle through this loop as fast as possible. They build a small experiment, measure how customers react, and learn whether the idea is valid. This creates a rhythm of continuous discovery. Each loop eliminates guesswork. Each loop sharpens the vision. Each loop pushes the startup closer to product-market fit. Ries also highlights a psychological challenge that every entrepreneur faces: the discomfort of learning that contradicts your beliefs. Founders naturally fall in love with their ideas. They protect them, defend them, and treat them like pieces of their identity. But validated learning demands humility. It requires accepting that your idea is not perfect and that your assumptions may collapse. This humility is the birthplace of innovation. Entrepreneurs who cling to their fantasies fail. Those who embrace learning evolve. In this chapter, Ries shares a message that sounds simple but carries transformative power. A startup grows not by being right, but by getting better at being wrong. Mistakes are not the enemy, they are the raw material of learning. When you test small, learn fast, and iterate constantly, you turn failure into fuel. You turn uncertainty into opportunity. You turn your vision into something that can survive in the real world. Chapter 3 reveals the heartbeat of the lean startup method. It tells you that your job is not to perfectly predict the future, but to uncover it step by step. When you commit to validated learning, you replace fear with clarity, chaos with direction, and assumptions with truth. And that truth becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. Chapter 4: Experiment. In the world of startups, people often romanticize the idea of a big launch, that dramatic moment when a perfectly polished product is revealed to the world. But Chapter 4 of the Lean Startup dismantles this fantasy with precision. Eric Ries argues that the real work of innovation doesn't begin with a launch, it begins with an experiment. And not just any experiment, a structured test designed to uncover the truth about what your customers actually want. This chapter teaches a lesson many entrepreneurs avoid. Your idea is only a hypothesis until the real world proves otherwise. At the heart of this chapter lies a powerful shift in thinking. Most founders believe that building a product means crafting something complete, polished, and impressive. But the lean startup flips this idea on its head. Instead of building the final version first, you create the simplest, quickest, smallest representation of your idea, the minimum viable product, MVP. It isn't supposed to be perfect. It isn't supposed to impress anyone. Its purpose is far more important: to test a specific assumption and deliver real learning. Ries wants you to understand something profound about experiments, They aren't a sign of uncertainty or weakness. They are a sign of intelligence. They reflect the mindset of a builder who refuses to waste time, energy, and money creating something the world doesn't need. The MVP is not an inferior product, it is a strategic tool. It allows you to gather data early, to observe how real users behave, and to learn whether your idea is worth pursuing long before you've invested months into development. In other words, the MVP prevents premature perfection, one of the deadliest traps in entrepreneurship. But what makes this chapter stand out is the emotional and psychological challenge Ries brings to light. Creating an MVP forces you to confront your ego. It forces you to release something unfinished, flawed, even embarrassing into the hands of customers. Many founders resist this because they fear judgment, they fear criticism, they fear the possibility that the world might reject what they've built. Yet, as Ries explains, this vulnerability is necessary. Without it, you're building blind. With it, you're building smart. Chapter 4 also dives deeper into the nature of experiments. A good experiment is not just a random test, it is a scientific process. You start with a clear hypothesis, a belief about your customers or product that needs validation. Then you design an MVP that tests that belief. You define how you will measure success or failure. And finally, you observe reality. If the data supports your hypothesis, you move forward. If it contradicts your expectations, you adjust, iterate, or pivot. This approach makes startups resilient. They don't cling to blind optimism, they evolve with evidence. Ries illustrates how experiments cut through assumptions that choke innovation. Instead of debating endlessly in meetings, the lean startup tells you to run a test and let real customer behavior decide. Instead of arguing about features, build a simple version and watch how users respond. Instead of guessing what the market wants, experiment and let the market speak. This shift transforms entrepreneurship from a gamble into a disciplined process. Success becomes less about luck and more about learning. One of the most empowering ideas in this chapter is that experiments accelerate progress. Traditional businesses spend years planning and perfecting. Startups using the lean method move quickly because they don't pretend to know the answers, they search for them. By running experiments, they learn faster, adapt sooner, and avoid catastrophic mistakes. Each experiment, no matter how small, becomes a stepping stone toward a product that actually works. Chapter 4 ultimately teaches a lesson that resonates far beyond the world of startups. You don't need certainty to begin, you need curiosity. You don't need perfection, you need the courage to test. Every breakthrough innovation, every successful company, every extraordinary idea begins not with confidence, but with the willingness to experiment. And when you embrace experimentation, failure loses its power. It becomes not an ending, but a teacher. Chapter 5: Leaping. There comes a moment in every startup journey when the founder must stop theorizing, stop debating, stop dreaming, and take the leap. Chapter 5 of The Lean Startup explores this terrifying but necessary transition from planning to action, from assumptions to reality, from imagination to execution. And Ries makes one thing unmistakably clear: entrepreneurship is not an intellectual exercise, it is a leap of faith built on disciplined learning. What makes this chapter so powerful is that it confronts a fear many entrepreneurs never admit out loud: the fear of committing to a direction when the future is uncertain. Most people try to avoid this moment. They plan endlessly, they refine their business model, they wait until the timing feels perfect. But Ries argues that waiting is the enemy. In a world that changes this fast, hesitation is more dangerous than risk. The Lean Startup teaches that progress only begins when you leap, not blindly, but with intention. But what does it mean to leap in the Lean Startup framework? It means choosing which assumptions are so foundational that the entire business depends on them. These are the leap of faith assumptions, the core beliefs about your customers, your product, and your value that must be tested before anything else. For example, will customers actually care enough to use this? Will they pay for it? Does it solve a problem urgent enough to matter? These are not small questions. They cut straight to the heart of the startup. And yet, Ries argues, most founders avoid testing these assumptions because they fear unwanted answers. This is where the Lean Startup takes a bold position. Your leap must be guided by vision, but grounded in evidence. Vision gives you direction, it tells you why your idea matters and what kind of impact it can make. but evidence tells you whether your idea works in the real world. The leap happens in the space between these two forces. Too much vision without evidence leads to delusion. Too much evidence without vision leads to aimless tinkering. The successful entrepreneur stands right in the middle, balancing inspiration with data, daring to move forward even when the path is not fully clear. Rise challenges founders to stop hiding behind perfect scenarios and instead confront the truth early. The leap forces you to identify what you believe about your customers and then test those beliefs with an MVP. It forces you to stop asking, "Will people like this idea?" and instead ask, "What is the simplest way to find out?" This mindset shift transforms the leap from a gamble into a calculated exploration. Yes, it requires courage. Yes, it requires vulnerability. But it also unlocks something priceless: clarity. One of the hardest emotional battles in entrepreneurship is letting go of the fantasy that your idea will succeed exactly as imagined. The leap requires humility. It requires accepting that your initial vision is imperfect and that your assumptions are unproven. But instead of seeing this as a weakness, Rise reframes it as strength. When you leap based on hypotheses, not rigid beliefs, you are free to adjust. You are free to learn. You are free to evolve as reality unfolds. This chapter also emphasizes something subtle but transformative. The leap is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing discipline. Every major decision in a startup demands another leap. Each new feature, each pivot, each strategic shift requires courage to act without full certainty. The lean startup method doesn't eliminate risk. It teaches you how to navigate it with confidence, structure, and insight. Chapter 5 ultimately reveals a truth that lies at the core of entrepreneurship. You will never have enough information to feel completely ready. You will never have perfect clarity, perfect timing, or perfect certainty. But progress belongs to those who move anyway. Those who leap, not recklessly, but bravely. Not blindly, but with intention. And once you make that leap, armed with vision, guided by learning, you transform from a dreamer into a creator, shaping a future that once existed only in your imagination. Conclusion. As we reach the end of this journey through the lean startup, it becomes clear that this book is more than a guide for entrepreneurs. It is a blueprint for anyone who dares to build something meaningful in a world defined by uncertainty. Eric Ries doesn't just teach frameworks. He challenges the way we think about progress itself. He shows us that success isn't about predicting the future, but about adapting to it. It isn't about being perfect, but about being willing to learn faster than everyone else. And as we reflect on each chapter, from mastering vision to testing assumptions to taking bold leaps, we begin to realize that the real startup is not the company we build, but the mindset we cultivate. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your own ideas or scared that your dream might not work, remember this: every great innovation, every iconic business, every life-changing product started as nothing more than a fragile hypothesis, a guess, a possibility. What separates those who succeed from those who never begin is the courage to test their assumptions and the resilience to grow from the results. And the lean startup method gives you the structure to move forward confidently, even when the path feels uncertain. It teaches you how to turn risk into clarity, how to turn failure into data, and how to turn ambition into actual progress. But the most important lesson is this: you cannot learn by standing still. You cannot improve by waiting for the perfect moment, and you cannot build anything significant without taking the first imperfect step. So if something inside you is pushing you to create, to innovate, to change your life or your business, don't ignore that voice. Let this be the moment you leap. Let this be the moment you stop overthinking and start experimenting. Your idea deserves motion. Your vision deserves momentum. And now, before you leave, I want to invite you to take one small action that helps this message reach more people who need it. If you found value in this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next breakdown of a life-changing book. It takes you just a second, but it makes a massive difference in helping this community grow. And if you know someone, a friend, a coworker, a student, who dreams of starting something but feels lost in the process, share this video with them. You might be giving them the spark they've been waiting for. Thank you for spending this time with me. Your curiosity, your ambition, and your willingness to learn are what truly bring these ideas to life. Keep learning relentlessly, keep experimenting boldly, and above all, keep building the future only you can create. Until next time, stay inspired, stay hungry, and never stop taking the next step forward.